What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's my watch list ahead of Game Week 11. So some of the players that I'm keeping an eye on over the next couple of weeks. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you're new around here. The first player we're going to talk about is Darwin Nunez. And I know a lot of people won't like this because Liverpool have just lost another game. But as always, we need to kind of separate the results and what's happening from that perspective and what's happening from an FPL point of view, which is Liverpool are still scoring goals, right? They drew the game against Brighton, not great. They scored 3 goals. They lost the game against Arsenal, not great. They still managed to score 2 goals against what is a pretty good defence. And we've all seen this change in formation to kind of more of a 4-4-2. So Diaz on the left, Salah on the right, and obviously that's not going well at all. He's more like a right midfielder. He's playing quite deep, not really getting into the box. He had 1 touch in the box against Arsenal yesterday. But this isn't a show about Salah or anything like that. And then obviously Nunez and Jota were playing up front, but there is Firmino there as well. So Nunez in one way is not necessarily a great option because his minutes are at risk. But what we saw yesterday was Luis Diaz having to come off with an injury. We don't yet know the extent of that, but Klopp did say it didn't look good. He said the same for Trent Alexander-Arnold as well. Now, if that is the case, then you would assume that Jota will just play on the left. So his minutes are now pretty good if that happens, and he could also be an option. But if they stick for this 4-4-2 or 4-2-3-1, it kind of lines up differently depending on whether they got the ball or not. Nunez should get quite a few minutes because it would then be him and Firmino up front. And he does seem to be hogging a lot of the chances. If you watch the Rangers game, he had loads of chances. He probably had the best chances against Arsenal as well. Obviously, Firmino took his goal really well. But for 8.8 million, he is a bit of a differential. And his underlying numbers are pretty decent. Like, he's only played a handful of games for kind of like 70 to 90 minutes. Obviously, his sub-appearance, he got the red card as well. So we haven't seen him play every single game for Liverpool. But when he has played, he's done well. 1.03 expected goals per 90 minutes. That is excellent. 0.4 expected assists. And again, we kind of got a... Like, some people keep comparing like Darwin Nunez to Haaland. We've got to forget about Haaland. He's set and forget captain. We've got him in our teams no matter what. This is a slightly or much cheaper player that we're not going to be looking to captain anyway. And I think when I look at those fixtures, they're pretty decent. And again, I don't expect Liverpool to win that game against Man City. They might struggle to win the game against West Ham. But one thing I do expect them to do is continue to score goals. They are very good at doing that no matter what shape they play. Now, obviously, the caveat to that is, if Diaz is out, that's not great. If Trent is injured, that's also not great. I know he's not playing well, but he is one of the more creative players in that team. So if Joe Gomez now plays right back, that probably makes them better defensively, but not going forward. So they really need to keep Thiago fit. So going for Darwin Nunez is not without kind of slight risks, but I do think that Liverpool are going to continue to score goals. And I look at West Ham when obviously City and Arsenal blank, Forest away and Leeds at home. They are really nice fixtures to have him in. And it's not like he eats up a huge amount of the budget either at 8.8. And he could even be a placeholder for Jesus if you want him back later. But I think when you look at those fixtures from 13 to 16, Jesus is a brilliant option, right? And I would love him in my team. But because we are contending with a blank, I don't think it's completely out of the question to get Darwin Nunez in 12 instead, and maybe even just hold him all the way to 16. The beauty right now, it's kind of a good thing and a bad thing for FPL, is there's lots of midweek fixtures, so Champions League. So that's not great for the players, but it does allow us to kind of watch another game, see who's injured, what Klopp and other managers say about their team, but also more importantly, whether or not he sticks with this formation. If he does, I think it looks really good for Nunez. If you've watched the last 2 Liverpool games, he's getting a lot of chances, and 8.8 million to me seems like a pretty good price. I'm tempted. No matter what's happened with the other Liverpool players I've got, I'm still tempted because they are still scoring plenty of goals, and that will continue. So another player I'm looking at that I'm sure a lot of you are as well is Leandro Trossard. And if you're going to bring him in, then one of the next 2 weeks is the time to do it. Brentford away is not that bad of a fixture. They are conceding plenty of goals right now. They just conceded 5 to Newcastle as well. And let's remember that Brighton have played extremely well from an attacking sense so far this season. And Nottingham Forest at home looks really good. And to be honest, for a lot of you, you're in dreamland. And I don't want to keep mentioning him, but if you don't own Salah, you don't really need to get him back right now. And I think Trossard is a pretty good captain against Nottingham Forest at home, in Game Week 12. So I think a lot of people are going to look at him. Now, for me, it's a difficult one because the only way to really get him this week is if I sell Salah to fund Harry Kane, who we're going to talk about in a minute. That's not completely out of the question, but I think there are going to be other things for me to deal with. But one thing I've got in mind is for those of us with James Maddison, he is 1 yellow card away from missing a game. So if he gets his yellow card in Game Week 11, we're going to go into Game Week 12 where a lot of us are holding Man City and Arsenal players players and we're relying on our bench, and then Maddison won't play. If that happens, I think the switch for me will be Maddison to Trossard for 1 week, and then I'll look to get in Saka or Foden. That's kind of the current plan. So I do think if you're going to get him, it preferably needs to be this week, but it doesn't matter if you bring him in game week 12 as a placeholder for one of those other kind of £8 million midfielders that we want to get in. Obviously, you can just bank the money for a little bit. I don't think long term I necessarily want to hold on to him, because as good as Brighton have been, Man City away is the hardest fixture you're going to have all season. I think Chelsea at home is also going to be pretty difficult. There's obviously maybe more on the line in that game, because this Brighton team are going to want to show Graham Potter they are still as good without him, and obviously they'd love to go and beat Chelsea, but I don't think it suddenly makes them that much better, because they're going to want to win all these games anyway, right? So I think Trossard is a good short-term option, and I think in a different situation and another time in FPL, you could probably just hold him through those fixtures for Wolves away and Villa at home. But the City and Arsenal fixtures are so good from 13 onwards that I think we should be looking at getting the likes of Foden, Saka, Jesus in, and not really holding Trossard. So he's on the watch list, but for a very short amount of time. It's either this week, if I decide, which I don't know if I will, but if I decide to take a hit to get rid of Salah, Trent, and bring Harry Kane in, or possibly in game week 12 if James Maddison goes and gets his yellow card. But he looks a really nice option for that week, and if you don't want to get Salah, he's a great captain. You can just worry about everything else going on in your team. So lots of people have said recently that I haven't talked about Harry Kane enough, so let's discuss him in this one. Obviously, this is a watch list for kind of my team, but it's a good chance to give my thoughts and opinions on players that you might be looking to bring in as well. And I'm sure a lot of people are looking to bring in Kane. Now, he is flagged in FPL. That is worth noting at the moment, but we do have the Champions League game to come. So if he plays in that, doesn't get injured, doesn't go off with a knock or anything like that, we know he's probably going to be good for Everton at home. And he looks like a decent option, right? And I'm sure a lot... And actually, this is how quick the FPL landscape changes. So if you think back to a few weeks ago, even if you take Salah out of the equation, a lot of people wanted Salah or De Bruyne, and one of the reasons for that was because up front, moving to a 3-4-3, Haaland, Mitrovic, and a lot of people wanted Tony as well, and obviously Isak was popular on Game Week 8 wildcards. The forward line has kind of changed a little bit now, so everyone's still got Haaland. Mitrovic might be injured. Wilson could be an option, but they got Man United and Spurs in the next 3 games. Isak's obviously injured right now. Tony's just not as appealing as he was. I don't think the fixtures are quite as good, so no one's in a rush to get him. Nobody wants Solanke either. Daka isn't necessarily nailed. All these problems suddenly with forwards, and it looks pretty good to have Harry Kane take up one of those spots and maybe get a few more of the £8 million midfielders in. So again, a few weeks ago, not all the comments, but there was a lot of discussion around how £8 million midfielders just not worth it, right? If you go back and look at the game week preview, that's the kind of questions that are coming in. All of a sudden, Foden looks great, Saka looks great, Bowen's scoring, people have got Zaha, Maddison just got like an 18-19 pointer the week before as well. There's loads of midfielders, so again, things can change quickly and it might shift back in a few weeks. But if you can get to it easily, having a forward line of Haaland, Kane plus one other, maybe even playing 3-5-2, could be an option. And then you work towards having Foden, Saka after game week 13. Lots of people have got Martinelli. And then you could just fit someone else in, Bowen or Maddison, whoever it might be. That might be the way to go about it. So I do think Kane's a really good option going forward. I think when you look at those fixtures, look, Man United away and Liverpool at home, I think they're the kind of fixtures where you're not really worried about them when they're kind of part of a 5-6 game week fixture run, right? They're not so bad that when you see Man United away on a fixture list, you're thinking, right, I need to get a player to target them. Same with Liverpool. They are shipping goals, but you don't look at Liverpool at home and think, right, I really need a player for that game. But the difference is when you see a block of fixtures like this, you're not too worried that your player has to play them. So Everton at home, Newcastle at home, Bournemouth away, Leeds at home look like pretty good fixtures. And then you're not really worried about those Man United and Liverpool games. Kane's also cheaper than both Salah and De Bruyne, so that helps as well. So not only do you take up that forward slot, you also have more money to spend elsewhere. I don't think we really need it right now, to be honest. There's not many players around the 9 to 10 million pound price point that we're looking at. Trent's now not an option either. So Cancelo, who's got a blank coming up, and Liverpool away, and Reece James, they're really the most expensive defenders we're even looking at. So you don't necessarily need the money, but from a structure perspective, having Kane and then having those £8 million midfielders looks pretty good. That could shift again very soon, but that's kind of the landscape of FPL. I think for some people who do have Salah, like me, one move that they're probably looking at is Salah and a forward, whoever it is. It could be you've got Solanke, you've got Tony, Mitrovic is out injured or something like that, because he might not necessarily make the Bournemouth game. You could do Salah, plus that forward, or even De Bruyne, because he's obviously got Liverpool away, then a blank, plus your forward, to Trossard with 2 good fixtures the next couple of weeks, and Harry Kane instead. And that leaves you a little bit more flexible elsewhere if you need to make some upgrades later on. So I really like Harry Kane. I think for my own team, I've got issues. I've got Trent's probably injured. Nico Williams, we'll see tonight. He's obviously playing Monday Night Football. If he doesn't start, that's now a minute's concern, a player that I need for game week 12. I just don't know if I'm going to have enough transfers to shift to Harry Kane, but I'm absolutely not ruling it out at the moment. Not with the way that Salah and not that Liverpool aren't scoring, but the way Salah is playing in that kind of 4-4-2 formation. So even with Man United away and Spurs away in the next 3 game weeks, I'm seriously considering getting Kieran Trippier back into my FPL team. So I did have him for a couple of weeks. Unfortunately, I didn't go for him in game week 1 when a lot of you did. That was a really great call. But I had him for a couple of weeks, then I removed him on wildcard. I was so close to having him. I think it was like the last 30 or 40 seconds before the game week 9 deadline. I removed him to make sure I had extra money in the bank to be a little bit more flexible. And it turns out I don't even need that money now. So he will probably have to come back in. I do own Trent Alexander-Arnold. He did go off with an injury. He is flagged in FPL as well. And Klopp said it didn't sound good. I know some people were speculating that maybe he was just brought off because he wasn't playing well, which he wasn't, right? He was defending badly. Joe Gomez did do a little bit of a better job there. I mean, it was obviously difficult playing up against Martinelli, but Trent wasn't great at all. But I do think that injury is probably playing a part. And if he does miss the Champions League game and Klopp says that he might be out for a little while, I've got to sell him. Arguably, I should probably be selling him anyway, the way they've been playing. But obviously the fixtures do get a little bit better for Liverpool soon. But Kieran Trippier is probably the number 1 defender that I'm looking at. And to be honest, I don't think the Man United away and Spurs away are that good. I do think that Newcastle can concede, but the way he's playing this year, his assist threat has gone up, so his expected assists are now 0.2. They're a bit lower last year. He can get an attack and return in any of these games, and Newcastle defence has just been pretty good. I don't necessarily expect them to keep out Man United and Spurs completely, but you just never know. And the other fixtures around it, up until game week 16 at least, are pretty decent. But what it mostly comes down to is 2 things. One, how consistent he's been. So you see here, he's only blanked against Liverpool and obviously Wolves away, so the 1-1. Pretty much every game outside of that he's got points. But also there's just a lack of options. There is just a lack of other defender options. Like if we go to the list here, and I mean it doesn't matter, I can get any defender I want. Cancelo I already own, and obviously he's got Liverpool away. I'm not expecting points in that. And then he's got a blank game week anyway. Yes, of course I want him from game week 13 to 16, 3 home games. Like I wouldn't put it past Man City to get 3 or 4 clean sheets in that game. They're that good. Arsenal again, defence has been really good so far this season. Leeds away, they could probably get a clean sheet in that game, but I'm not going to bring a defender in because they could concede, of course, and then it's a blank game week. After that, the fixtures are pretty good, and I wouldn't be completely against having an Arsenal defender, but I'm not going to bring him in this week, right? Not with Leeds away and then a blank. Similarly with Spurs, I think they've got maybe slightly better fixtures than Newcastle overall, but to get one of their defenders that's attacking, I want the likes of Perisic or Doherty. Their minutes aren't guaranteed, so I can't go there either. And you kind of get the problem, right? Man City's in a similar position to Arsenal in that they've got Liverpool away, so it's even harder to get a clean sheet this week. Again, we go back to Liverpool, and I think people find it really difficult to separate results from FPL opportunity. Yes, Liverpool have not been great. Yes, Man City will probably go and win that game, but they'll almost certainly concede. So you can't get a Man City defender in this week, a second one. And also, who's nailed? Akanji, Laporte, Ake, lots of kind of difficulty in getting the absolutely nailed defender. I wouldn't be surprised if Akanji is the second most nailed behind Cancelo right now. But again, I can't bring them in this week. And the list just goes on and on and on. The one that I would possibly look at is Zuma. But again, Southampton away, then Liverpool away. Is that better than just getting Trippier in, who's more attacking? Probably not. Dunk is an option, or Webster at Brighton. Brentford away and Nottingham Forest at home. I think they might be the most genuine option that I could possibly go for that's not Trippier this week. But again, bringing in a player for an away game, Brentford away, that's less attacking than Trippier, I'm just not sure about it. I think a lot will depend for my team, just to go off on a tangent, on what happens with Nico Williams. Because if he isn't playing tonight, like if he comes on for a cameo, that then puts his place at risk for the next few weeks, and I need him to play in game week 12 if I'm going to bench Cancelo, Haaland and Martinelli. So what I could possibly do is get Dunk or Webster in this week and then look at getting Trippier the week after for the game against Everton at home in game week 11, I think. In game week 12. But ultimately, there's just not many defenders. The only one I think I would consider that's not Brighton and not Trippier this week, I probably will look to get Trippier in regardless eventually for game week 12, is a second Chelsea defender, possibly Cucurella. I think he might be probably the second most nailed behind Reece James. And I do think Reece James will play the majority. I don't know if these fixtures are good enough for clean sheets. There's so many away games between game week 11 and 16. It kind of just does put me off a little bit. But I do think Chelsea will be defensively solid under Potter. So that is why I probably will get Trippier this week if Trent Alexander-Arnold is out. Because although the next 3 fixtures are not great overall, Man United and Spurs away, there's just a huge lack of other options. Like, you know, big at the back was a thing in game week 1. That was a perfectly fine discussion. The likes of Trent, Robertson, you know, Chilwell was playing a few games in pre-season, Reece James, like all these players we thought were going to do really well, and it hasn't. And the landscape has changed a bit. And I've said landscape a few times in this video now. And I think if you're someone that doesn't own Trippier, I think you can still genuinely consider him this week, even though it's Man United away. If you need 2 defender transfers over the next couple of weeks, then yes, maybe you could go for a Brighton one first and then get Trippier. But I don't think I'll be that worried about bringing him in against Man United away. I don't think he necessarily keeps a clean sheet, but he could get an attacking return for sure. I think Newcastle will score in that game. So I'm heavily considering Trippier. That's the 4 players on my watch list for this week. If you enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you're new around here, and I'll be back tomorrow with transfer tips.